This is what my annual maintenance looks like on a battery operated chainsaw. This is the DeWalt DCC 677, and it's going to be very similar to any of the other battery operated chainsaws out there, and very, very similar to a gas operated chainsaw, with the only difference being we don't have to deal with an air filter, a spark plug, a carburetor, and there's a lot less power in this, so there's other items that are not as much of a wear item. But we're gonna go through this top to bottom. Stick with us. If your saw has a case, this is a great time to go through, clean everything in here out. This is actually pretty clean because I try to keep the case clean because I want to know how much oil the saw is leaking. All you guys always ask how much this 677 leaks. This is all I have here, which really isn't that bad. So this saw is not much of a leaker. We're just going to go through, vacuum it out, and then wipe it out with a rag. Just like new, and we'll be able to see if this saw is continuing to leak or if we have any other problems. With this chainsaw, I tend to sharpen the chain about every 2 or 3 full battery drains, and that's about 1 use. So I'm normally keeping this pretty sharp. In this case, we're gonna sharpen this chain last. I wanna be able to get the chain clean and make sure everything is kinda right to spec, and then I'm gonna spend more time on sharpening this chain because it's an annual one, and I'm gonna make sure everything is all set. So in this case, I'm just gonna take everything apart and just get it to the point where it's easily maintenanceable. You can see inside here, not a lot's going on, but you don't want to lose these 2 washers. This is pretty simple stuff inside here. Nothing overly complicated, but we can take this off. We'll clean this up later. There are some holes in here that you want to make sure that are absolutely clean. But for the basic time now, we want to just get all this gunk out of here. And a lot of the ways that I found is really easy to do, grab an old toothbrush, right? And a lot of the times, if I'm using a gas saw that's been used quite a bit, I'll take a little bit of gas or a little bit of carb cleaner, anything like that, to help kind of spray in here to get this out. But I want to get most of this stuff out first. So just clean this up. Anything that's got oil on it, anything that's got this nasty stuff, sawdust caked with oil, get that out. Then we can start to concentrate on what we really need to look at. I try to keep my workbench clean while I'm working on this because you don't want to lose any of these small parts in piles of sawdust. At this point, I want to concentrate on getting the body of the saw clean in. Some of the big points I look at are battery compartment, making sure that all the chips are out, all the connections are clean. Then I want to make sure that all the vent areas are clean so we don't have anything that's plugging them up. You can see in some cases here, these have quite a bit of sawdust in them, and I'll work around some of the oil areas and then just get in some of the areas that were a little bit more fussy. So I just use my air hose with this, pretty light. It works pretty quick. And gets the saw clean, especially for areas that are hard to get into, this gear. And then anything up here that's got oil. Just make sure you have stuff covering your eyes. From there, I take some mechanics wipes. These work really great on a lot of different things. You can get them at the store. This is just simple. I go over the tool. It's basically a wet wipe. I bet you could probably use Clorox wipes if you didn't have anything like this, but these are meant for oil and grease. Go through and clean everything up. Look for spots where things don't look right. Here you can see I have a chain that hit, which is going to lead me over to this side, which here I have a chain that hit, and you can see one of these spikes is bent out. So we're going to have to correct that before we put this back together. So it's nice to just look around, see what you see on this saw, make sure that you don't have anything that looks wildly out of place, and make sure we get everything clean and in operating condition. I like to follow up with a fairly dirty, this is one of the old car microcloths. I don't use them over and over on the car, but these microfiber cloths work really well at just picking things up, drying it back off, so I don't leave any residue. I don't want any oil or anything like that on here, so when I grab the saw, it's not nasty, my hands aren't slipping, and this is very easy just to get things clean again with this style of rag. On this saw in this area, we want to make sure that our adjusting pin is clean inside there, able to move. That's going to adjust via this here. So make sure everything moves easily and is clean. On the top, right in here, we have our oiler. This is a little different than many of the other ones, but it fills up this whole oil well and then uses the top pin on your chainsaw bar to put oil up onto the chain. That's going to happen basically through that center. You can see the knife goes through there. And it's going to happen on both sides, so you can flip this guy upside down. We're going to clean this all out later to make sure that will happen and work, but for right now, we want to make sure that this is completely clean in here so we can get oil through, and that oiler is not plugged. That is very important. Then you can look at this gear mechanism here, and you can see that there is some marks on it from the chain, but if this gets wore down at all, just replace it. If that were to break in the field, that's going to stop you from cutting. That is a wear item. This is our chain cover. As we can see, I have a chain that's hitting here a little bit. That happened. So somewhere along the line, this got bent in, either from throwing it in the back of the ATV or whatever it is. We're going to have to straighten that out. But it's not a bad idea to clean this first. Compressed air can do wonders in this case, and then get in there with some cleaner. We want to be able to make sure everything's clean so that we can get all this cleaned out, and then look at the areas that might be affected, by our oiler, which would be this top bar that is closed, and make sure we don't have a ton of oil collecting in this bottom, because that would come back in by the pin. That's where your adjuster is. So just clean this guy up, get all that stuff out. With these marks on the bottom of our chain hitting there once, obviously that got bent over, so we're just going to lightly take an adjustable wrench, bend that tooth back, and make sure that we are in a line. Also want to make sure that this is tight on here, which it is. That seems to line up quite well at this point. We're just going to make sure that that chain isn't hitting there again. Next, I put the chain in bar in the parts washer, and I'm just letting the chain soak a bit in there while I work on the bar. I want to make sure with the bar that I get in all the grooves, get around the oiler, make sure all that stuff is cleaned out well. And even after you're done and out of that situation, you want to make sure that you have something that you can run through that groove. That groove is very important to have cleaned out, and even after working, in the parts cleaner, there is stuff in that groove. This groove is important because it's carrying oil to your chain. You want to make sure that it's completely cleaned out all around where the oil goes in, both sides, because we're going to flip this bar over. So we want to make sure that this is completely cleaned out. You can hit it with some air, especially around the oilers. Make sure we're set. On the other end, where the chain goes around, I always make sure that that's cleaned out. They have a little screw here in the end. You're seeing some oil coming out there. That's where all this is. Make sure this turns well. Some people like to grease that. I'm not a big fan of it. I know we get some oil in there. And then I always want to look down the top of this bar, feel it. If your bar is ever going one way or another and you find yourself kind of just turning as you go into a cut, your bar might have some sort of a different angle to it. So that's why we flip this. We'll get more wear each time we go through it. Even on a bar like this, not a big deal. It's not, it's an electric chainsaw, probably not being used all the time, but annually we flip this bar around and we keep flipping it. It'll just get us more life. Now the chain. Chain was in there, it's clean. It shouldn't have any oils or anything on it from the tree. That's great. We should be able to see the cutting edges on here good. We should be able to just check out everything as we look through it, and that will allow us to get in and really sharpen this guy well. At this point, we have everything clean, so let's assemble the saw. We're going to make sure everything is in the grooves. I take that as an easy time just to tighten that up a little bit, get everything so it stays. We're clean on this end, everything's working well, and I want to check to make sure that nothing is close to hitting. Looks like bending that back worked out perfect. Hand tighten those, and then we'll set our tension. We want to be able to pull down a little bit, not too far. We don't want to be able to pull out anywhere past those grooves or teeth in the bottom. We want it to snap back in place. Then we'll tighten this guy up. At this point, we are clean and pretty much ready to sharpen. Sharpening this time should be a little bit more intense than in the field. I like to use this steel sharpening system. It's kind of like an all-in-one. Gets the rakes, it gets everything set, so we can just get in here and spend some time doing it right. So from here, we're back together. Everything is super sharp. I took a lot of time to make sure that this chain is right. If you're working on an electric saw, they usually have low profile chains. Getting one of these to work is going to be time consuming to find the right size file and get everything in there. DeWalt sends a file with this, so I just replaced the file in here and it seems to work out well. I have to move it around side to side, but either way, these guys are awesome if you can get the right size. With that said, spend some time here, get this clean. Some people like to spray some type of like SC1 or silicone spray over this to keep everything good. I like to keep it as it is. I don't want anything else on here that's going to get on top of my hands or my gloves while I'm using this. At this point in time, I put it away. I will put a check mark on this. This is the only saw that I have that is like this. So I take a little check right there. That check, I always do a visual and check that to make sure everything's set. That check's going to let me know that this has had its annual, and the next time that I'm using it, I want to make sure that I can see bar oil coming out. So I'll take this, turn it on, put it up against a tree, let it run for 30 seconds or so just to get that little line of oil on the tree to make sure that I have enough bar oil coming out, and then I'll go to cutting. If you have multiple saws and you've done the full thing or replaced air filters, pull the air filter off the back of the air filter cover right inside when you put that air filter on. It's great to know, good things to do. Anything that is a maintenance item, right on this, that check mark will be gone fairly quickly. I could put a date on here. On all of my steel saws, I put a date as to when it's done because I don't remember which steel saw I went through. Sometimes I can spend some time on those saws to really go through. Sharpening this chain usually takes maybe 4 or 5 minutes. In this case, I spent probably 20 minutes really going through this chain to make sure that everything was right. So you can spend some time on this, getting these things cleaned up and ready to go. From here, this is just gonna go back in the case, and probably in the fall when we start cutting again, or at least midsummer when we're doing some firewood or anything like that, this will come out and be ready to rock and roll. I do keep this clean when I put it back in, so I'll try to use the air compressor again, blow this off, but eventually they need to be taken apart again. Love to hear your comments below. What else do you do? What other things do you do? Do you think that anything I did here is unnecessary? Love to hear your thoughts. Put them below. Give us a like in this video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for your time. Have a great day.